When I was preparing for the message this morning, one of the things I made a journey to where I knew of an old pastor that he was long since retired, but he was known and famous in the area for just having all kinds of gems and nuggets of wisdom. He's long since retired, but one of the things is that he really loved to do is he loved to help out at the church with a lot of things like maintenance and all those. Well, I went looking for him then, because I wanted him to see if he would share with me just a little gem or a nugget that I might share with you this morning. So I found him, and when I found him, he was working at the church just like as what I was expected, but he was pouring concrete to make a new sidewalk. And as I came up to him, the concrete had already been poured, and he was taking a big trowel and he was making it all nice and smooth. And so I came up behind him, and his name was Phil, and I asked him, I said, Phil, I'm sharing on Sunday, and I was wondering if you could share with me just a little gem or a nugget that I might share with the folks on Sunday morning. Well, he didn't answer at first. He just continued on working, and I watched him from his back, and I was thinking, well, he's thinking, which means he's going to give me a real gem. So finally, after a few moments, he turns his head up and he looks at me and he says, "Love one another." And then he goes back to his work. And so I was sitting there and I was thinking, okay, that's it then. Thanks a lot, Phil. I appreciate that. That was a real gem, all right. But even as I was thinking about that, and I was starting to get a little bit, some children were there playing at the church, and they were playing a game of tag. And as they were running all around, and they would come running along, and he had set off his sidewalk with some of that yellow tape. Well, those kids ran right through the tape, and they ended up taking their tag game all the way down his freshly laid cement sidewalk. All those little footprints all the way down the entire length. And all of a sudden, Phil, he jumped up with a speed that actually just caught me totally by surprise. And he managed to run down those kids, and he grabbed them by the collars, and he started banging their heads together. And he started saying all kinds of things to them that, to be honest, this morning I just wouldn't want to repeat. So I decided, I better go and I need to rescue those children. So I went up and I said, Pastor Phil, no, what did you just tell me now? You said, love one another, remember? And he said, yes. But then I was speaking in the abstract and not in my concrete. Not in my concrete, you see. Our scripture text today comes from the Gospel of John. Chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, which says simply this: "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Even as I have loved you, so you should love one another. And by this, the whole world will know that you are my disciples, because you have love for one another." Now, this morning, I have a question, I guess, that I wanted to ask. Well, based upon this text of what Jesus had to say, he says that if we get this one thing right, if we love one another, the whole world is going to know. So the question I'd like to ask is, are we getting it right? Does the whole world know? And I think if we were honest, we'd have to say, you know what? We must not be getting it quite right. And you know, it seems like it would be something, that sounds like it would be just very basic and very simple, doesn't it? Love one another. If you can do that, the whole world is going to know to whom you belong. But because the whole world doesn't seem to know yet, the only thing that I can conclude is that while the commandment is very simple, and this is probably a message that we might have heard hundreds of times, but the fact of the matter is, we haven't gotten it quite right yet, have Some of the things that I would like to know based upon this text is, well, so how do we go about and how do we get it right? And one of the things that I find very interesting about it is that Jesus, he speaks it as a command. And I have to ask the question, well, can love that is a result of a command, can that be real? If I have to tell you to love, is that love real? And the answer I concluded is yes. Yes, it is. I wanted to share a story with you this morning. It was back when I was a kid in grade school. I was one of those little angels that somehow always managed to find himself in a little bit of trouble. A little bit of conflict, you might say. And whenever you were in a tussle on the playground at my school, you had to deal with that most fearsome of creatures known as Mrs. Minthorn. Now, Mrs. Minthorn was the playground aide. She was probably I don't think she was much taller than any one of us kids on the playground. She didn't look very dangerous. She wore the little cat-eye glasses with the little chain that hung around her neck. Her hair was always up in a tight little bun, and I don't think she weighed more than 90 pounds when she was soaking wet. But you did not want to incur the wrath of Mrs. Minthorn. You have to understand, Mrs. Minthorn, she was the actual inventor and the perfecter of the Vulcan neck pinch. You might have heard of it. But when Mrs. Minthorn applied the Vulcan neck pinch, instant paralysis would set in. And once she had you paralyzed, now you were at her complete mercy. And once paralyzed, we would then receive the lecture about how we needed to behave on her playground. Not ours, but hers. And after we received the lecture, she would release the Vulcan neck pinch, and she would issue us a command. She would say, "No, I want you to shake hands and be friends." Now, how many of you know that if you've just been in a fight, in a tussle with somebody, and when somebody commands you to shake hands and be friends, how loving do you feel? How friendly do you feel? You don't feel very friendly at all now, do you? But the thing is, we also knew at this moment that it was in fact a command, and that if we did not obey, the Vulcan neck pinch would be reapplied, and we would be on our way to the principal's office. So we would comply. We would shake hands. And while there would be a little bit of who can squeeze the other person's hand hardest, and we would say, "All right, friends." And then after we had made friends, we would then be exiled to have to go and stand in front of the dreaded brick wall for the rest of recess. But while we were standing there, we'd be kind of looking at each other. Every once in a while, a little would go up. And by the end of recess, all of the battles had been forgotten. And somehow, once again, we were in fact friends once more. Can love, at the issue of a command, can that be real? Well, the answer is yes, because you see, love is not a feeling. Love always begins with a choice, doesn't it? Jesus gives us a command to love, and it is a command we choose to obey. And there's a reason why it has to be a command, because to love is the hardest thing that we'll ever be asked to do. Now, if the commandment was to go and to love Will McDonald, fulfilling that command would be easy. Just ask my wife, Gayla.